ongoing series of exciting informational workshops, busting myths about conventional knowledge in medicine, medical training, healthcare careers, and information that's out in the community. And so I'm really excited, and it's my pleasure, and I'm feel very privileged and honored to have been asked to speak today to all of the audience that's both online and here with us in person. My name is Cynthia Perry. I'm the Associate Dean for Admissions for the Foster School of Medicine, and I'm also an Associate Professor in the Department of Medical Education. So I'm in a unique position in that I get to not only work with the community and be involved in programs that we run, engaging with the community and being involved in outreach all the way from K through 12 to our undergraduate population, our non-traditional applicants to medical school. But then I also have the pleasure of being able to work with our medical students as well. So I actually teach our first and second year medical students, and then sometimes get to come back in and teach our third and fourth year students too with some of their electives. So I feel very honored to be able to do what I do and to get to see students. We've actually had students in the community that have participated in some of our middle school activities and outreach programs that we run, our high school programs that we run, and then actually have now matriculated to the medical school here. So it's been really a true pleasure to be able to see students come through our pathway programs and then achieve their dreams of being able to go to medical school. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the myths that may be out there as far as how to get to medical school and what that path looks like. I wanted to start just with, instead of just jumping into the myths, I wanted to just do kind of a quick presentation about what that path looks like, and then we're going to jump into those myths afterwards. So let's go ahead and go forward, and we can go to this one. Yeah, so one just brief plug, our office not only puts on a lot of outreach activities, we do school visits, actually at all grade levels. We also do activities and tours on campus. We do advising for pre-med students. So if that is something that interests you or anyone that you know, please feel free to refer them to our office. And we're happy to set up lots of different activities and opportunities for people to get involved and learn more about the pathway to medical school. And if you're interested or know someone that's interested in other healthcare professions, we can also help get you guys or get them to the right people as well. So, all right. So I'm going to start out talking about the actual admissions process. The medical school here is part of a larger, I guess, association of medical schools all across the U.S. And medical schools are separated into allopathic and osteopathic training programs. And our school is part of the AAMC, which is the American Association of Medical Colleges. And what that is really a governing board that helps oversee all of our policies and processes, our curriculum, and it really helps develop policy at the national level. It makes recommendations to states and to national political decision makers on the status of healthcare, the status of medicine, careers in medicine, and also the education process. So what medical schools look like. And the reason that I mention that is because they help us develop a lot of guidelines for what are the best ways to basically do things. And so I would say a little over a decade ago, a group of people from the AAMC got together and thought about what are some of the big barriers that we see in the profession of medicine. One of the big issues was the diversity or the representation of physicians. And there just wasn't, the body of doctors across the US just wasn't reflective of what people in the US look like. And so how can the AAMC helped to address that as a governing or policy making body. It can help provide kind of recommendations to medical schools on selecting trainees that will help to diversify the physician workforce. Okay, and so that's where this idea of holistic review came from. Okay, and so as if you are interested in applying to medicine, you're going to hear this term a lot, holistic review. So I wanted to make sure that everybody knows what that means. This is where it comes from. So this model was developed by the AAMC, and basically they were like, okay, what are all of the possible things that we could, in theory, potentially evaluate when we're looking at an applicant? And so this is everything they came up with. They came up with metrics. So those are like the traditional things that we think of when we think of a medical school applicant. Like, they have to be really smart. So they have to have their GPA. They have to have also an entrance exam, which is called the MCAT. And so all those things in the center are those academic metrics. Now, other things are attributes. So potentially a school could evaluate based on different characteristics, okay? This doesn't mean every school uses all of these, but this is just in theory what a school could potentially use, right? And then of course, when we think about these options, this is like a list of potential things that we could use. We have to think about laws that limit it. So there's federal laws and state laws that tell schools what they can and can't use. And that also applies to even HR processes, like hiring processes as well, right? And then there's experiences. So this gives us the EAM model, okay? Experiences, attributes, and metrics. And then an individual school will then kind of pick and choose what things they prioritize at their program, okay? And so that way, it lets them be able to weigh different things higher or lower based on what that school's mission is. For instance, our mission here at the Foster School of Medicine is to prepare culturally competent physicians that are likely to practice in our region or in a region like that. What does that mean? It means students that are very likely going to need to have Spanish competency. They're going to need to, studies tell us that if a student is from our area, they're very likely to go back and practice in that area or any similar area, right? So that may be another border county. And for those reasons, we actually, in our selection process, weigh some of those factors more heavily, okay? So we consider things that other schools may not, because for other schools, it's not built into their school's mission, okay? So that's just an example. And then this road to being a physician, it's a very long and windy road, and we'll see in a second that everyone's path doesn't always look like this, and that's perfectly fine, because actually in our process, we tend to like to see students that have a little bit different path than what we would consider a traditional applicant, because it tends to give our applicants a little bit more life experience, and that helps to diversify our class. Now, that may mean that they went on and pursued a different career, or they pursued some additional training, or they started a family and they had kids before they decided to apply to medical school. All of those things help bring a different perspective to our incoming class, okay? And so when we think about diversity, we don't just necessarily think about that as far as race and ethnicity. We also think about that as diversity of thought and perspective, because everybody has different experiences, right? And so those experiences are going to also shape the type of class that we have. All right. Maybe not. Okay. Okay. So this is just a quick selection of the things that we actually look for in our application process. Now, there's lots of different things that factor into each of these, but what you'll see is that these actually align back with that model that we were just looking at, okay? So there's some of these that are academic metrics. So we do look at your overall science GPA. We look at your overall average GPA. We do look at MCAT scores, but we also look at things like your science GPA trend. So we look for an upward improvement. One of the things that we also recognize is that a lot of our applicant population especially if they're like a first-gen applicant, or they're from a lower socioeconomic status, and I'll talk about what that means. They may have struggled a little bit transitioning from high school to college. And so that means that they may have started out with maybe a lower GPA at the beginning of college. And so as they were getting better test taking skills, as they were learning how to adjust their time management, and then just kind of getting used to being an adult, being on their own, getting to make their own decisions, figuring out, when they had to go to class, because there's not really anyone telling them, like, you have to get up and the bell rings at this time. College is a totally different ballgame. So we understand that college students from a lot of the populations that we look at may have struggled a little bit and then learned to adapt and gotten better and become more successful. So we actually give credit for students that demonstrate an upward trend. All right, so that's what we mean by a trend, like your GPA trend or improvement over time. And then we obviously want to see students are able to handle like a stronger, more challenging course load later on and still have a strong GPA towards the end, okay? Post-bac education. So we also give credit for students that, maybe pursued a master's or took additional courses after they graduated college, or got another degree, whether that's a master's, a post-bac certificate, went on to get their doctorate in something else, and then decided to switch to medicine. All of that, as I mentioned, just provides a new, different perspective, a different level of maturity, and so we give credit for that also. One of the things, I'm going to focus on two main things here in the non-cognitive section. For us, we group all non-healthcare related activities together. And so those can include a number of different things. Those can include research. We get a lot of questions of, do I have to do research as an applicant? And the answer is no. If you're not passionate about doing research, you shouldn't be spending your time doing research because you feel like you're just checking off a box that you have to do to go to medical school. If you're really passionate about teaching, tutoring, working with youth, or doing some type of community service, then you should be spending your time doing that. We would rather you doing something that's valuable and that means something to you, because we want to read about what you're passionate about in your application. And so that's why we group all of that into one category. And we score it all evenly. We don't weigh research more. Obviously, we do want to see anyone do some type of community engagement. The reason for that is because that's another one of our values here. We do a lot of community engagement. Our medical students can attest to that. We have medical student-run free clinics. We do a lot of service learning, which means our students are working with volunteer organizations. It is a priority for us as an institution here to give back to our community and to involve our community and to let our community know that we're here as a resource and that we want to help, we want to engage everybody that's not necessarily formally part of Texas Tech. So we want to make sure that our candidates that we're bringing in have those same values. They enjoy giving back. They enjoy doing service, okay? So that is something that I always tell applicants that's imperative for them to have. But that doesn't always have to look like one thing or the other, okay? It doesn't have to be volunteering in hospice. It doesn't have to be volunteering at a food pantry. It can be whatever kind of service speaks to you as an applicant. Another thing is employment. We also understand that our applicant pool looks a little bit different if they are from a lower SES category. Again, I'm going to talk about what that means in a second. You may have had to work. You may have had to help contribute to household income. You may have had to help put yourself through college, and that leaves less time for you to do other extracurricular activities. So we understand that. That's why we group employment into these other non-healthcare related activities. What I will say is what's important, if you did have to work, tell us what you got out of it, okay? We'll have an applicant that worked as a barista. There's nothing inherently wrong with working as a barista in a coffee shop, but tell me what you learned from it that's going to help you be a better doctor. And some students or some applicants are actually really good at doing that. I was not good at public speaking, so I chose to become a barista and work in a coffee shop because it helped me improve my interaction with the public. It helped me improve how I work with others. It helped improve my teamwork. I learned leadership skills. I became a shift manager. Those are amazing skills that you need as a physician. So if you can communicate the skills that you gained in whatever job it was, then that's absolutely fine, okay? And you're not going to get docked for that, all right? So for us, when we look at an applicant, it's all about balance, all right? If you had to work, obviously, I would say the one thing with that is that we also want to make sure that every applicant also is doing some medically related activities, okay? So the reason for that is because the very worst thing that we could do is admit a student that had other amazing life experiences, had really strong academic metrics, but then they get to medical school and they're like, I hate medicine. I don't want to be a doctor, because they didn't get enough experience in the clinical setting to see what that job actually looks like, what the challenges are, to understand that it's not always going to be saving your patient. It's not always going to be fixing something, right? There's a lot of emotional toll that comes with it. There's a lot of challenging days. There's a lot of paperwork. So it's not everything that you guys see on TV. It's not all of the feel-good stories. It's a lot of that, but there's also really challenging aspects to the career. And if you haven't been in that setting enough to see that, then you haven't been able to do that self-reflection. Okay, so we actually want to make sure that you do have that. Now, what is socioeconomic status and why does that matter? So socioeconomic status is a lot of different things. Research tells us that students that are first generation, students that grew up in a household where they relied on free or reduced price lunches, they had subsidized housing, they had Medicaid, all of these things tend to have less access to resources that prepared them for professional education. Now, that is not a bad thing. We want those students because you know what? Those students are going to go out and serve the patient population that we have here. Those students are going to make fantastic physicians that can relate to their patients, that understand the challenges that come with accessing healthcare. But we also recognize that those students are going to have a harder time understanding the pathway to apply to medicine. And so that means that they may need to have the field leveraged a little bit to help them get into medical school. And so that's why it's important for us to understand every applicant's socioeconomic status, because those students also typically as a group, if you're on the lower spectrum of the SES statuses, you don't have the same type of social capital, which means you don't have the same type of access to networking. Your parents don't know a bunch of doctors they can call up and say, hey, you know, can my kid shadow with you? Or like parents that went to college and then went to medical school and were like, hey, this is how you fill out an application. This is what you need to do. This is what the timeline looks like. Those students don't have those resources. Okay, so how can we help them get to that next level? What kind of resources can we provide them to make sure that they can get to medical school, because we know they're going to be fantastic doctors. Okay, that's why that's important. So as an applicant, as you're filling these things out, as you're hearing these terms, you should never feel like they're going to disadvantage you, like they're going to be used against you in any way. It's all going to help you as an applicant become a stronger candidate, make sure that the schools know what kind of resources you need to be successful, and just have a better picture of the kinds of students they're bringing in so they can bring in a diverse class that's going to make a better educational experience for you, okay? Any questions on that so far? Ton of stuff. All right. It's a little bit blurry. Sorry about that. I just kind of wanted to go over some stats really quickly. This is our last class that we just sat in entry year 2022. So they will graduate in 2026. That's a lot of applications. So we get almost 5,000 applications per class. That's a lot. We completed, when we think about, this is the number of students that say they want to apply to us and submit just the primary application. But there's a lot of other things, right? You have to submit your test scores, your letters of recommendation. We have a secondary application. So this whittles down to a measly like 3,200, okay? So then from there, we invite to interview somewhere around 600. And then this is all to select a class of about 124 students is what we sat in our last incoming class, all right? So this looks really challenging, right? This looks like an impossible feat to overcome. Like, how do I get from the 5,000 down to 100? And that's what our office is here for. That's what, we want to be a resource to help you guys, help all of our applicants be the best applicant that they can be. And also, it's important to recognize that not every school is going to be the right fit for you. Okay, so these 5,000 applicants are also applying to every other medical school in Texas, and maybe even some outside of Texas, all right? And the first cycle, the second cycle, the third cycle, it might not be your time, all right? And that's okay. Half of our current incoming roster for this next class that will start in July, actually, I think about 40% of them are reapplicants. Okay, so that means that they've applied 1, 2, 3 other multiple cycles before actually getting an acceptance letter. And that's nothing to look down upon whatsoever. Like, we love our reapplicants because, again, like I was talking about, they have more life experience, they have some maturity. We can look at an applicant and say, gosh, they were great, their metrics are great, I have no doubt they'll be academically strong, but they were just kind of a little immature maybe. And so they might just need like another year to go out, live life, get some experiences, and then come back and be a really great contributor to an incoming class. And that's completely fine. You want to be ready. We want to make sure that you're ready, okay? Let's see. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to mention too, we're unique as a medical school because we require Spanish in our curriculum, but that doesn't necessarily mean we require of an applicant, okay? And so that's another thing that I hear when I'm out on the recruiting trail. I know you guys have a Spanish requirement. Does that mean that I have to know Spanish coming in? Or are you going to evaluate me as an applicant based on how much Spanish I know? No, the answer is no. We don't evaluate that. We don't consider that in your application, okay? And then once you do get selected, then we will assess you to see how much or how little Spanish you know. It doesn't make a difference. We have a goal of our students, once they graduate, being able to do their exams in both English and Spanish, be conversational English and Spanish, but our more proficient, more fluent, our native speakers, they can go on and do other things like do certifications as a translator, those kinds of things, right? So we have a curriculum for every level, all right? And so no, you don't need to know Spanish to apply here and be considered a competitive applicant. This goes back to some of the other things I talked about. You don't have to have a ton of hours in research. You don't have to have a ton of hours in any one specific area, okay? Now, some of these may be confusing because you see some of these with 0 hours, and that means that they probably did things that they categorized in other areas on the application, right? So students probably did some other kinds of healthcare activities, but they might have counted it as volunteer work, all right? So it just kind of depends on where you place things in your application. But I wanted to highlight this simply because you don't have to do a ton of any just one thing if that one thing isn't something you're passionate about. Also, we as a school are 2 to 3 points on average for the MCAT. So that MCAT is your placement, considered a placement or entry exam for medical school. We're about 2 to 3 points below the matriculating both national and state average. So for students that get accepted to medical school at other schools and across the nation, in Texas and elsewhere, our MCAT average is lower. And that is due to what I've been talking to you guys about, that we're mission focused, okay? We're really looking for certain students that are gonna fulfill our mission and align with the values that we have here, okay? And so that doesn't necessarily mean that we're focusing really heavily on your academic numbers as much as other schools might. All right. Okay, tons of data here. I really just want to focus on that very last column. So this is the group that I've been showing you guys those stats on. And the big thing here, you guys can see just the total number of applicants, how it's changed from year to year. For many years, it was increasing steadily. It's kind of tapered out. EY21 was an anomaly all across the nation. A lot of people said it was because of the Fauci effect. But really, that's not realistic because preparing to apply to medical school isn't something you just decide because of a pandemic. It's something you've been preparing to do, right? So whatever the reason, maybe students felt like they were preparing, but they were thinking about holding off a year and then decided just to go ahead and apply that year. There's a lot of different factors for why we saw that huge bump that year. But yeah, this is what it looks like. Probably somewhere around 5,000 applications is on average what we get. Okay. I do want to highlight this middle section because these are our diversity categories for the Foster School of Medicine. So these are things that we, when we're thinking about how we want to diversify our class and we're thinking about what our mission is, we're looking at definitely recruiting students that are from our region, and we're really proud of our ability to do that, to recruit and retain our local talent. That's really important to us, and we really try our best to get all of our local students as much scholarship money to stay here as we can. So just having a diverse class, but also recruiting students from our region and also from other border counties, which are counties along the U.S.-Mexico border, are also important for us as well. Okay. Let's see. I think that's all I wanted to focus on there. All right. So last thing I want to touch on before we jump into the questions is just the timeline. If you are thinking about applying to medical school, I would say the very first thing and the best thing that you can do for yourself is to reach out to our office so that we can help you start making a plan. We can look at what you're doing. We can look at what activities you're involved in. We can figure out where you need to strengthen yourself as a future applicant. But if you're getting close to applying, this is really important because you need to understand what that timeline looks like and start planning. The planning process is probably about 1.5 years out just for the application itself, okay? Because you have to start thinking about when you're going to study for the MCAT, and that might mean if you're a current college student, you have to schedule your classes around that, so you want to pick like an easier course load that semester. It's a lot of planning, okay? So work with our office to start thinking about that. We also work very closely with the medical professions office at UTEP also if you're local, okay? Those are the biggest things I think I want to talk about there. So I'm going to go back and start working through some of these myths that maybe I didn't already cover. How do you want me to do this? You want to ask them to me?
Yeah, so I guess we'll start off.
Okay.
Most of them were addressed, but we'll just kind of go
through
each one. So we'll start off with the most important part of my application is my GPA.
Yeah, so this goes back to the idea of holistic review. We don't have a cutoff or what you would consider a threshold for GPA or for MCAT. That means that we don't say, okay, this is no, like we won't even look at you. What we do, and I would encourage all candidates to do this, is to look at the AAMC data. They have really nice tables where they look at MCAT, they look at GPA, and they look at the percent likelihood of you graduating on time, and then also progressing from first and second year of medical school into your third and fourth year of medical school, because that's really from a curriculum perspective where the first 2 years are more like your basic science foundational in the classroom years. The second years are when you're more working in the clinical setting. And so we look at that progression into the third and fourth year. And there's tables that candidates can look at to see what the likelihood of being successful. We don't want to accept a student that's not likely to be successful, but we also understand there's always going to be outliers. So we do kind of look at those predictive numbers just as a guideline, but again, we don't have a cutoff.
So the next one would be, I should take all my courses at a 4-year college because medical schools do not recognize community college credits.
So partially this used to be correct. This changed actually a lot thanks to COVID. The policy used to be that your core prerequisite courses had to be done at a 4-year college that was your degree granting institution. That's not true anymore because with COVID, we recognized there was a ton of additional challenges. We always made an exception. So it can vary from school to school, but we recognize that as long as a course that even if it's taken at a community college or online, as long as an undergraduate institution that's granting your degree will accept it for transfer credit, then we'll accept it. Okay, so yes, it can be taken at a CC or JCC, and we will accept it. Just make sure. Our biggest thing is that they're like junior colleges and community colleges tend to offer more of like the non-major science courses, and so those are the ones that you want to try to avoid. Okay, you want to make sure it's going to count towards your degree.
And then the next one was repeating a course will help my chances of getting accepted. And this is more towards if you were to get like a D or a C, and then just kind of trying to bump up your GPA.
Yeah, so for any of the required prereq courses, you do have to have a C or better. Okay, so if you did get below that, you would have to retake it just so that you have all of your prereqs. But if you already got a C or better, it would really depend on what your overall GPA is, and just simply repeating one class, I know you guys probably know too, it's not going to have that big of an impact on your GPA. So there's better strategies, which may mean like a post-bac program to help boost your GPA, okay? And their post-bac programs are awesome because students that do those programs come to medical school and they are successful.
And the next one is you must major in a science field to be accepted.
No, false. We love our non-science majors. As long as you have your prereqs, you can major in anything you want. And I think that's amazing because it gives you, as an applicant, it gives you totally different perspective. And again, it brings that diversity of thought to the class. So we love our liberal arts majors, political science majors, everything.
And then we answered the middle one, which was you need to have a perfect score in your MCAT. And the next one be first generation medical school applicants are less likely to be successful in medical school and in their careers.
Yep, no. I mentioned we love our first gen students. I'm first gen. My dad was a truck driver. My mom was stay at home and then was a secretary. And yeah, it's just you might need some extra support, and you might need to like seek out a community that's going to support you. But that's great because we all need that. So.
And the next one was it's too late to apply if you don't apply during your senior year of college.
No, take whatever time you guys need. We want you guys to be ready and not rush. Same with taking the MCAT. We want you to be ready to take the MCAT and not feel rushed. So if that means that you need to take a gap year, take a gap year. If you need to take two, take whatever time you need so that you are the best applicant when you apply. Otherwise, you're wasting money and wasting our time too. Is there a question?
So then there was a question online.
Okay.
Since I was a dual credit student, would I have to wait a few years to apply for medical school?
No, there's so we have dual credit's an interesting thing. Okay. So one of the things I will say is that if you are or if you have siblings that are considering dual credit, they can be great because they're a great money saving option. However, a lot of our dual credit applicants don't realize that those grades count towards your medical school application, right? So you're like a sophomore, junior in high school, you're taking dual credit classes, you know, you're like, oh, these classes don't really matter that much, but that GPA is actually going to count towards your medical school application. So that's one of the big drawbacks that we see with dual credit. I just want to make sure to get that out there. And those classes don't always prepare students. And those students aren't always mature enough to be ready to go to medical school. So there's certainly not an age cutoff. There's not a requirement. You don't have to be X number of years out of college or anything like that to apply. I would just say you just need to have enough self-reflection to know if you're ready to start professional school, even if you have the credit hours to graduate from college. That maybe you need to go do like AmeriCorps for a couple of years or do something. Just get some life experience because medical school's no joke. And if I were in college, I would have stayed for like 7 years instead of getting through in like 4, because that's the best time of your life. So don't rush.
And I think we already talked about research experience is a must have. And then non-traditional applicants are unable to handle the rigorous demands of medical school.
No. The only thing with that is that I will say if you're non-traditional, you've been out of college for several years, one of the things that you might want to consider is just to register for a college course, because it's just going to help you to refresh your study skills. There's a lot different being a student than being out in the workforce, right? That time management is completely different. Learning, all of the new like study resources that are out there, that's like a whole skill set in and of itself, like the kinds of digital flashcards that are available, the kinds of study resources and websites and apps and all of that. So being a non-traditional student, we have absolutely no problem with, but you just want to make sure that you're academically ready to jump back into being a student, and you can best demonstrate that by taking a course or something, just to show like, hey, I know what it's like. I'm ready to be a student again. Okay.
And then the last one was first-generation applicants to medical school are less qualified than those from families with a history of medical professionals.
No. Yeah, that word qualified is like tricky. What does that mean? Like I said, our best students that are going to go out, serve our community, and become the very best physicians for our community like ours, or communities all over the nation, our first gen students that are come from lower socioeconomic statuses, had less resources, didn't have a doctor in the family, but they're so passionate about what they do. And so it absolutely does not mean that they're any less qualified or capable.
And then we have I guess one last question that someone posted. Does an application holding a green card pending status qualify to apply?
So our school requires U.S. citizenship or permanent resident. So we do look at that, and we also do look at when the permanent resident visa is set to expire. But there are medical schools that take DACA students, that take international students. So it just depends on the individual program.
Okay. And I think that was about it for all the myths. And then no questions right now. I don't know if anyone in the crowd had any questions for Dr. Perry. No? And I guess that's about it for the presentation from Dr. Perry. Thank you. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
And it's been I can put it in the middle of the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted my MCAT for it, but also if I don't do it, it's after the summer program. Well, and I do it after the summer program. Do you think it's too late? Because I know it's kind of the first come for sure. So
yeah. So first of all, take it when you're ready. Don't rush it. If you take it and you're not happy with the score, but you already submitted your application and then you register for another test date, we'll see that there's a pending test date, and usually we'll just hold the application until we receive that score. Keep in mind, it takes about 30 days after you take the test for us to receive the score. I would say what's too late? In that case, if you already had your application in and you already have a score in, your letters are all in, I wouldn't take a test past early August. Our local applicants, I think, are at an advantage because we really are looking for them. So we're gonna take another look for those candidates, and really keep a close eye on their applications. But take it when you're ready.
So how many times can you take the
5?
5?
Mm-hmm.
And then
That's it. Yeah.
What are good resources to study for that?
Yeah, so it depends on personal preference, I would say, because some students are sufficient in just using their course textbooks and that was enough for them. But some students need to actually take a formal course through a prep program, whether it's Kaplan, Princeton, any of those. Some are okay with using, online video resources. So it's hard because it really just depends on what works best for you. And also it depends on where your weaknesses are. Because if you're okay in your, physical sciences and bio, but your CARS, like critical analysis and reading, is lower, that's something that's more challenging. That's like, you just need to start reading a bunch of novels. Because it's true, like it sounds funny, but actually for some of our pathway programs, we're just like, CARS prep doesn't have that high of a success when it comes to like formal Kaplan courses, those kinds of things. Like, we just need our students to read. And the problem more and more is that nobody's reading textbooks. So and nobody just reads books to read for leisure. So we're having our pathway students like just do book clubs, because it's like reading, distilling information, like understanding like general concepts. What was like the purpose or the main message of this passage? Like, we're not students that aren't that good at doing that anymore because they're not just reading. So just doing a lot of reading.
And I think that would be about it for Dr. Perry's presentation.
Thank
you so much, Dr. Perry.
Yeah,
Coming
thanks.
here. Thank you so much. And then we're gonna have one more presentation, and then we'll have the student panel. So the next presentation is going to be by our Director of Student Success, Glenn. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Perry. This is how she said we can move it.
Oh.
The camera.
Wait, let me.
I can bring my computer.
So just like as an overview, right now we have Dr. Perry, we're going to have our Director of Student Success, Glenn, and then we're going to have the student panel. So
There you go. And then if you just want that right. Thanks.
Camera's right here. All right, can everyone hear me all right? All right, cool. Good evening, my name is Glenn. I am the Director for Student Success here within the Paul Foster School of Medicine. So I was asked to come talk about just what are some things that y'all can do in regards to preparing for medical school, in regards to learning strategies, self-care. My job is the Director for Student Success. I oversee our academic support program. So I meet with students, offer academic coaching, talking about how to study. I also oversee our peer tutoring program and work with students on navigating the challenges of medical school. And so just a little bit about myself. I am a member of the Office of Student Affairs. That is our team right there. I've actually been with Paul, been here at the medical school for 3 years. I started on March 3rd, 2020. So that was quite a time to start. But I have my master's in counseling psychology, and I'm actually also a doctoral student at Texas Tech, earning my PhD in higher education administration. Oh, I'm sorry. I like to walk around, but the camera's right here, so you're going to see these guys yelling at me throughout the evening. So I've been working in higher ed. I've worked at the undergraduate level for more than 8 years, but I've been here for 3. And like I said, I oversee our academic support programs. So kind of just the agenda for my presentation. I should only take about 10, 15 minutes. First thing I want to talk about is learning strategies. And these are things that I talk with medical students and how they can prepare for their exams. But these learning strategies are universal. It doesn't matter if you're in medical school, nursing school, engineering school, you're preparing for your MCAT. These are things that you can utilize. Next, I kind of want to focus on a little personal wellness, because that is another big challenge I've noticed with medical students or healthcare profession students in general. And the last thing I'm going to highlight is just the resources we have here at the School of Medicine for our students, and just to highlight what sort of support we provide, and encourage y'all to look for these resources at your institutions in the undergraduate level, or if you're in graduate programs, definitely utilize them. So just to jump in, we'll talk about learning strategies first. And so how many of you have heard of VARK, the visual, auditory, reading, writing, kinesthetic learning models? How many of y'all? Some of y'all? We were talking a little bit about myths, and this is actually one of the biggest myths in education. These learning styles, there's actually zero empirical data, zero evidence that people learn better a certain way based upon their preference. I do call these learning preferences, and as a PhD student, I call myself an auditory learner, because I'd rather listen to a professor lecture for a whole day than read one chapter of a book. That is just me, that is my preference. But that doesn't necessarily mean I learn better from listening to somebody. I can learn just as well from reading a book. And so really the best approach is a multimodal. So it's not just utilizing one strategy, but it's utilizing all of these strategies. Dr. Perry was just talking about the car section of the MCAT. It's really challenging if we're not reading. Like for me, I don't like to read, so I shy away from it because it's uncomfortable. But the reality is I need to read. I'm in a PhD program. I have a lot to read. In medical school, you have a lot to read, and it can be very helpful to build those skills by engaging in those activities. And so just because you don't like reading doesn't mean you're not going to learn well that way. It might be just uncomfortable. It might not be pleasant, but that's also a sign that that is something that you can develop your skills in. So if these aren't, if this isn't something that you can really utilize to study, what can you do? And so these are some evidence-based strategies. There's a book called Make It Stick. It's by 3 authors, Peter C. Brown, Henry L. Roediger III, and then Mark A. Daniel. So these gentlemen, 2 of them are cognitive psychologists and 1 is an author. The reason I mention that is the 2 cognitive psychologists, this book is based upon empirical data. It is not their personal opinion about, oh, this is what worked for us. You can go on YouTube and you can see, oh, I got a perfect score on the MCAT. This is my secret. That is one person's experience. Good for you, dude. I'm glad it worked out for you, but that might not be the situation for everyone. Where evidence-based strategies are things that have done, that science says are effective. And then I mentioned that one of the authors is like an author. His job is writing books, and I mentioned that because it's very well written. It's not a textbook. It's very easy to read, and you learn a lot from it. And so I definitely recommend checking that book out. I think it's about $30 on Amazon, or you might be able to find it in the library, find it used somewhere. But they, in their book, they highlight 3 learning strategies, and they talk about the science behind it: retrieval practice, interleaving, and space practice. Retrieval practice is essentially cueing yourself to bring back information that you've already looked at. Self-testing and self-quizzing. Self-quizzing, the way I explain it is when you're looking at information, you think to yourself, how does this relate to what I already know? How might this come up on an exam? How might this be practical? What are some things that I can do what is a mnemonic that I can develop to recall this information? Practice questions. I'm sure many of you, as you prepare for the MCAT or as you prepared for the MCAT, did practice questions. That is an evidence-based strategy that is proven to be really effective. Interleaving, as you can see, the graphic I have up there it looks like a sweater that somebody sewed. Sewed's not the word. Knitted together. There you go. So that interleaving is really you're knitting information together. And so I'm working with students as they prepare for their first board exam this month. And I always encourage them, mix up the material that you're looking at. You don't want to spend a whole day looking at one concept and then spend the next whole day looking at a different concept. I'm taking a statistics class right now, and I absolutely hate it, partially because it's challenging. And the way they set up the practice problems, I don't do the same sort of practice problem over and over. They do one concept, they do another concept, they do another concept, and then they might mix it. They might jump back to that first concept, and that is that concept of interleaving. You're not doing the same type of problem over and over. You're mixing up the different types of problems and seeing how they interrelate. So that is another very effective strategy for learning. And then space practice. Space practice is another term for space practice is the antithesis of mass practice. Mass practice is just a fancy word for procrastination. How many of y'all procrastinate? Yeah, same here. I was born 2 weeks late, so I've been doing it since birth. So, in other words, procrastination is not very effective. And they talk about this in the book. They've done studies where people who procrastinate, they do that mass practice right before an exam. How do you think they compare to the people who study longitudinally on that same exam? The people who procrastinate actually did better. However, when they took another similar exam a week later, the people who did the spaced practice outperformed by huge margin. So for long-term retention, which is what you don't want to remember something just for a couple of days and then forget it. You want to remember information in the long term. That spaced repetition is very, very, very effective. And then this isn't so much of a strategy as it is more of a thing to be cognizant of, is avoiding easy. So I always use the example of if I were to go to the gym and pick up a 5-pound weight and lift that 5-pound weight, 100 times, am I going to build muscle? Am I going to get ripped? No, not. I might get a really toned arm, but I'm actually not going to really have any growth. Whereas if I go pick up a 30-pound weight, it's a lot more challenging. It's a lot more difficult. I'm going to gain a lot more out of that experience. And the same thing goes for the content that we're reviewing or the skills that we are developing, like reading. And so avoiding easy, if something is easy, it's probably not very helpful. So kind of looking at some of those easy and ineffective strategies. Highlighting. Is highlighting an easy activity? Yeah, it is. It is very easy, especially when you make your whole textbook neon yellow. Same thing as rereading. Rereading something isn't very, very effective. Copying, pasting notes, passively watching videos, and so these are all very passive strategies. So active learning kind of lends itself to those other strategies where you're testing yourself, you're quizzing yourself, you're looking at how you can mix information together, and you're looking for those connections. And so just keep that in mind about trying to avoid those easy activities. Highlighting is inherently bad. No, it's not. But you need to be intentional about how you do it and then what you do with that information after you highlight it. So that's a little bit about learning strategies. The next thing I want to talk about really quick is just personal wellness. In my position, I do get to talk, speak with a lot of medical students. I think I haven't run the numbers this year, but last year I met with about over almost a third of our whole student body. So we have 450 students. I met with close to 150 of them. My math is not very good, but it's actually more than 150. Anyways, so I get a chance to speak with a lot of medical students and learn their challenges, learn their struggles. And personal wellness is one of the biggest challenges, especially when you start medical school, because you have this. And y'all are shaking your head because when you're studying and it's like, okay, my friends are going out, do I want to go with them? And you say, no, I need to study. And then if you go out with them, how do you feel? Yeah, you feel guilty. You're like, oh man, I shouldn't be having fun right now. I should be at home miserable with my textbooks. And so we need to be really cognizant of wellness. And so it's easier to practice these things now, but while you're preparing for medical school, than it is to start medical school and be like, okay, let me start my training. It's like you're not going to start training for a marathon the day before. You're not going to, train for a marathon after you start. And so, taking care of yourself. There are 4 main things I really talk about with students, and that first is sleep. Getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night, and sleep is actually very important in the learning process. When you're sleeping, that is when your brain consolidates information. It trims your neural synapses that you're not using. And if you're not sleeping appropriately, those mechanisms of memory are being impacted. And then also, when you study the next day, you're not fully functional. You're compromised. And so getting that 7 to 8 hours of sleep and going to bed at the same time in the same night, or going to bed at the same time every night, and then waking up at the same time every morning helps you build consistency, helps you build a routine. And so that is something to be cognizant of. Exercise is another thing. I encourage every single one of our medical students to exercise in some shape or form. It doesn't mean that you need to go run marathons. It doesn't mean that you need to go to the gym and pump iron. Just doing something physical. There's a book called Spark. I can't remember. I think Dr. John Rady, he's a psychiatrist at Harvard. He wrote this book about how exercise impacts the brain. And just 30 minutes of aerobic exercise, your brain creates something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which has been linked to memory retention and learning. And so not only does exercise have physical health benefits, it also is a stress reliever, and then also helps. So it helps with your mental health, but also helps with your learning. Attaining proper nutrition, making sure you're eating. If your body is not getting the proper nutrition, your body starts to compromise in some of its functions, which can impact your learning as well. And the last thing is coping strategies. My coping strategies, I'm a big metalhead, so my coping strategy is going to concerts and moshing, finding something that you enjoy, something that you enjoy to relieve stress. Coping mechanisms is not just things that you enjoy doing, but also going to therapy. We do have counseling services here on campus. With COVID, the mental health demand just nationwide has skyrocketed. My background is counseling. My old counseling agency, I had like 2 office clients when I was there. They were referring people out because I couldn't keep up with the demand. So definitely taking advantage of those resources when you can. And then the last thing I want to highlight really quick is just the resources that we have here for our students, and keeping in mind that these are there might be some comparable resources at your current institutions that you can also take advantage of. And so here's just a quick list of some of the things that we have: our Medical Student Teaching Center, our Academic Success and Accessibility Office, our library, and then academic support. And so not to break my arm patting my own back, but the peer tutoring program that we have here is actually fairly robust. most medical schools do have some sort of peer tutoring program, and if they don't, they're probably developing one. I'm working with 2 other medical schools right now to help them develop their peer tutoring program. And so we do have weekly sessions, and we do offer individual tutoring sessions. Almost all undergraduate institutions offer a similar program, and some programs might even offer assistance with MCAT prep. Just talking about some of the other resources we have our accessibility office. So this helps students with accommodations, whether it be for examinations or in the classroom, and that's for students with physical or invisible or non-visible disabilities. We also have a faculty tutoring program here, and then the academic coaching that I do with medical students. So you might have somebody at your institutions that you can talk to for academic support or faculty tutoring. So Dr. Perry kind of referenced this earlier about just what sort of resources are there for preparing for MCAT. In medical school, there are so many supplemental resources, I couldn't possibly name them all, and you couldn't possibly use them all either. So it really is up to you about what you find to be preferable. These are some of the ones for medical students. I do know some of these resources like UWorld. I do have question banks for MCAT prep as well. So it's a matter of just doing your research, seeing what's financially feasible for you, and seeing what other people recommend. And then I think my last slide is just talking about extracurricular activities. So a really important part of retention in higher education is developing that community and being involved. So part of that is going to class. Part of that is utilizing the academic resources, going to tutoring, meeting with faculty. And then part of that is getting involved with different organizations on campus. We have an organization right here that's facilitating this today, our EP Heat team. But we also have interest groups about different specialties. We have different groups for underrepresented in medicine, like our Latino Student Medical Association. Developing that community, there is research that shows that the more connected you are to a campus, the more likely you are to persist. And that's just because you have that support to get through the challenges of school. So this is my contact information. If y'all think of any questions afterwards, feel free to send me an email. I believe this is being recorded, and it will be posted to the YouTube. Yeah, sure.
If you wanted to rewatch it or look at any of the resources, it'll be there.
Where's that?
Oh, it'll be on our YouTube channel. So it'll be under EPG YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can like share the email or
Yeah, so this recording will be on the EP Heat YouTube channel for anyone online who couldn't hear. So yeah, do y'all have any questions for me? Or I did a really good job explaining everything. All right, awesome. I'll be in the back for a while, so if you guys do think of anything or you want to approach me, I do not bite. And so, even though I am pretty hungry right now. But yeah, I appreciate your time. Oh, yes, sir. What was that? Which banks? The question banks? Yeah, so there are some question banks online that are free, but most of them you do have to pay something for, but I can give you a list of them. Yes, sir. Awesome. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
And I just wanted to thank you guys for I'm proud of you that they had it, so I appreciate it. So you want to say? So it's somewhere get it right. How do we do it? Do you know? Do you know how to do it?
So next we're going to be working on the
Do we
student
center it?
panel.
That'd be great.
So you go to camera control, and then
We want to move it towards here. I have
so we're looking at the
I think it's the front one.
no.
Wait, why am I not seeing that? Oh.
So it's either the rear left or rear right camera.
Yeah, I can see us again.
Are we trying to move the camera?
Yeah. To center towards the panel.
Okay,
table.
there we go. There we go.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, other way.
Other way.
And they said to go slow because then, and then down.
There you go.
Awesome.
Oh, that's perfect.
Thank you.
So much.
I'm gonna keep this here. Well, questions we cannot see them. We'll have to be standing up, but we can do that at the end.
Where's the computer? Yeah.
What do you mean?
To see the questions because
To see the
otherwise
questions?
we general chat. No, it
Yeah,
doesn't come up.
Oh, they don't come out?
No, they only show to you.
Oh, here, I'll manage the questions.
Yeah. But you also,
Because I'll do.
Oh, do you want to manage the questions?
I
Right
think
here?
it's because it's set up as a panel instead of like a open.
Oh, like a meeting.
Yeah.
Oh, that is.
Okay, ready? So next, we're gonna start introducing like the student panel.
Do I need to do something here?
are we gonna be sitting down?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so we'll,
Just press
so we'll, so first, we'll start off with our Jose Carlos.
Okay.
So hi everyone, so we didn't get a chance to an opportunity to actually like present what we do, but you've heard the term EP being thrown around. So we're basically one of the student organizations here at Foster School of Medicine. This organization was actually started by our mentor, Dr. Chacon, she's right over there. She started the organization actually in the midst of COVID. We were very interested in getting, well, we weren't here yet, but she was very interested alongside the students back then to bring some resources to the community. So especially there was so much uncertainty about vaccines, about what the pandemic was about. So she started putting a group of students together and started disseminating information about everything that was going on. After the pandemic sort of like started slowing down everything, we realized there were a lot of like myths and resources that we wanted to be providing the community. So one of our programs that we do is called Mythbusters, and we do all sorts of different things, typically for the general community. But then this year we were like, well, it'd be really cool if we did a Mythbuster sessions for medical students and talk a little bit about some of the myths that go around applying to medical school, what you actually need. So that's when we decided to put this panel together. So we're gonna quickly introduce ourselves. So my name is Jose Carlos. I was born in Mexico City, but I also lived in Brownsville, Texas for a little while. That's literally the opposite end of Texas, down the border, but still a border town. I went to Columbia University for undergrad. I did my BA in neuroscience, and I also did epidemiology, so I got an MPH. So my hobbies here, I love swimming and playing board games and anything nerdy. So if there's like a Marvel movie, I'll try to get the whole class together to go see it.
The whole.
Oh,
Maria.
Hi, I'm Maria Kiesler. I'm a first year medical student here. I'm from the Seattle area. I don't know if anyone knows where Issaquah is. That's my hometown. I went to UT Dallas for undergrad. Got a neuroscience degree there and just graduated in 2022. Some of my hobbies are playing the violin, playing Dungeons and Dragons with friends, swimming, cooking. I said bodybuilding with the little cameras covering it, but there's a little skeleton that I've been working on,
Wait, can
making
we?
muscles for crocheting them.
No.
I
Oh,
grew up-
yeah.
There it is.
That's cool.
All right, I'm not sure who's next, but.
Okay.
Everybody, that's the best picture of me you're gonna get. It's much cuter than I am. My name is Molly McCabe. I'm 29 years old. I use she, her pronouns. I was born in Georgetown Hospital in Washington, D.C., and I moved to Texas in 2018. I studied public health and literature and community service and all sorts of other things. And I am non-traditional. I did a lot of things before coming to school. I think that I fit perfectly what Dr. Perry was talking about when she said how tough the adjustment was when you come back after not being in school for a minute. The first unit here was so tough. I remember almost none of it. Thankfully, I fell into what, that like last minute math studying thing and like passed, but then like it was all gone. But we'll be reinforcing that later. I love to do art. I'm an athlete still, so I still love to work out and do a lot of sports, and I love nature, and I love my pup. He is named Wisache after one of my favorite trees.
Oh, it's my turn. Hi, everyone.
Oh, we sit down. Yeah, over there.
I am Sergio. I was born in Orange County, Anaheim, over in California. So then we moved here when I was around 2 or 3. I've grown up here in El Paso. I went to UTEP. I studied biochemistry. Let's see, what else do I have there? Oh yeah, I'm as traditional as it can get. My clinical interests, I like hematology and oncology. I have like a lot of interest in what's called gene and immunotherapy. In hobbies, I play piano classically. Yep. Next.
Hello, my name is Amadeus Ramirez. I'm non-traditional as it comes to. So basically, I graduated from here UTEP with a bachelor's in nursing, and then I worked as a nurse for about 5 years. I worked in ER, and then I did travel nursing for a bit, so I was living in different cities, just wherever they needed me. During the COVID pandemic, it was just, they needed nurses anywhere. So the whole time I was actually out of school, I was taking classes to get into medical school. So this was always the plan, but I kind of just took my time and basically just kind of wanted to travel and work in healthcare and see if this is where I wanted to be. And then I guess I love hiking with my dog, so this is Bunny. I named him Bunny just because he looks like a little rabbit. And he thinks he's a big hiking dog, so he'll jump and scale anywhere we go hiking. He's not scared of anything. And then just kind of any Marvel movies or anything like that.
Sachi?
Hi, you guys. So my name is Sachi. I couldn't find my professional photo, sorry. So I'm from Bel Air, which is an eastern suburb. I'm also very non-traditional. I got my bachelor's in economics, and then I graduated, got on a plane to South Korea, taught English as a foreign language there for 2 years, and then I came back, worked at a derm clinic, and then came here. My hobbies are watching K-dramas with my hubby and working out in my bougie gym, which y'all know what the bougie gym is. And that photo over there, that's my look mom, I'm on TV moment. That's my, basically, so like before med school, I did not study, do not study before med school. I did what I wanted to do, which was take a Korean class. And then that's my dog. Also buy cute costumes for your dogs, indulge. And that's it.
Stephanie.
Hello, everybody. My name is Stephanie Chaparro. I'm from El Paso, Texas, born and raised. I went to Cornell University and I got a BA in physics, so very different. And then I went to the Texas Tech graduate school here, and I did the postbac and then I did the master's. I'm also a non-traditional applicant. I applied twice, and I was a few years out of school. I worked in the ER as a scribe, and then I was a trainer, and then I was the chief scribe there for a few years. And my hobbies are spending time with my dog, and he's right there. He's the one who kind of keeps me grounded and tells me to like go on walks and get up from my desk. And I really like to like go to fitness classes, yoga, Pilates, also like watching movies and just hanging out with friends and family.
Cool. So let's start the panel.
So this is an open Q&A for online as well. So the reason I wanted to set up a student panel so you wouldn't feel maybe as intimidated as having like the dean of admissions or someone like that. So I figured it'd be easier to talk to someone who's been in your shoes. So someone who is in this process, who's gone through all of this, and any questions you have, no matter how small or how big, because I wanted to get someone from each, like a different background, so that way you have the most amount of information. So feel free to ask any questions.
Real quick, how many of us like on this table applied multiple cycles? Can we raise our hands? All right, cool. Yeah, so at least like almost half of us at least. So feel not afraid to ask about that as well.
And also disclaimer, we're all first years. So a lot of us wear your shoes if you're gonna be applying this upcoming cycle or anything. So please feel free to take advantage of that because we just started medical school and we're about to finish our first year, which is kind of crazy, but yeah, please, this is a time for you to ask any and all questions that you want to know. And we like giving the theme of busting myths. So
I think a great question would be, what do you think was different between your application when you got rejected and when you finally got in? for the lead applicant?
That's a good question.
Right?
Yeah.
I've been in your shoes.
Yeah. Yeah, you did.
Oh,
There was
just-
just like
that
all
was
the
the first
people
one.
on this side.
There's two.
Now there's 4 of us. Oh, there's
So I
5.
guess there's 2. Oh, wow.
Daughter.
So I guess for me, when I applied the first time, I didn't know anything about applying to med school, so I thought it was applying to nursing school, which was just sending in like a quick essay. They looked at my GPA, and it was like, okay, you're gonna get in or you're not. And I was like, oh, it'll be the same for med school. It shouldn't be a whole thing. No, it was like a whole thing. So then when I did the first application, I was super late. I think I submitted everything like the last day. I didn't know how to study for the MCAT, so I just straight read textbooks, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll just go and take it. So my MCAT score was low, and then I got all these rejection letters, and I was like, wow, what should I do better? But the good thing is a lot of schools reach out. So like I know that here at Texas Tech, they reached out and they were like, let's work with you and find out what your weaknesses were, and then you can figure out that and make basically, like Dr. Perry was saying, like a battle plan. And that's what I ended up doing. So I didn't have any volunteer service. I ended up clocking in over like 150 hours in within a year. I was low with shadowing hours, another 150 there. And then I needed to work on my test prep. So I actually paid for a test prep service. And this is what I'll say. So do what works best for you, not what everyone says. So I'm a big believer in Reddit. That's what I love. So I was like, oh, I'll do a test prep. Let me ask Reddit because, you know, best sources here. And they were like, don't do a test prep. And it was so wrong for me because I needed a test prep. I needed someone to kind of like coach me on how to take the exam because the MCAT is more learning how to take the test than actually, this sounds bad, but like then knowing the material because a lot of it I couldn't digest, like maybe some of the physics, but I knew what they were asking. So I was able to break it down. Even if I didn't know the concept, I knew exactly what they wanted. So that was like what led me to being here. So my second time applying, like my essays were way better, my MCAT score was better, and just my application overall, just anything they said was a weakness, I worked on. And I got it to the max that I could.
All right, yeah. I was, when I applied the first time, right at the end of, I guess, like teaching high school during the pandemic, and we were teaching remotely, and I started as soon as I was done with that academic year. I started in the summer, and again, I studied really hard. I paid for a test prep because I didn't really have confidence in my ability to do it on my own, and in the end, it was very expensive. But I mean, I think my score was okay. But I was so stressed about the whole thing that I started off being like the best in the analytical, like literature category. Like without studying, I would get in the 90th percentile. And then every practice test I took, that dropped. And I was like really working on the bio and physics. So those will rise incrementally. But by the time I took my MCAT, the literature portion was like the 30th percentile. So again, like, I don't know what to tell you. I actually retook a practice test after that and decided that it wasn't even worth it to retake the test. So I just stuck with that MCAT score and I crossed my fingers. I also didn't really know how to apply to schools the first time. I Googled medical schools and like, you know, Google is not your friend. Like I applied to all these schools that were not great matches for me, that were almost like the Ivy Leagues of med schools. I had no idea. I had no chance. They probably threw mine out first. I applied on the last day to deadline for everything because I thought it's a deadline for a reason. No. And I did have enough, I think, experience and background at that point. But with all that involved, obviously I didn't get in anywhere. So my second round applying was really just, it wasn't sort of like, oh, you need more experience or more like ganas or more like reason to be here. It was just like, you just didn't know how to do it. You need to talk to a counselor. And I actually reached out to my undergrad and I didn't realize that they were going to give me help for free. I got to talk to a counselor for free. They gave me interview practice remotely through video with some person at my undergrad who like coached me on interviewing. And it was all for free because your undergrad wants to look good. And they want to say that this X percent of our applicants made it to med school. So who knows? You might get a lot of stuff you don't have to pay for.
Okay, so I have like a very similar story too. The first time I applied, I really didn't know what I was doing. I applied late. I applied to very little bit of schools. The same thing. I did end up taking an MCAT course, mostly because everybody was doing that. So I was like, okay, let me do it. But the thing is, I was working and like working close to 40 hours a week and then getting home and taking that class, and I was just exhausted all the time. And I prioritized like going through the material rather than taking practice tests. So I took maybe 1 or 2 practices and then I took the MCAT and I didn't do so well. So the second time around, and I think also I was just rushing it because I had already been like a year or 2 out of undergrad, and I was like, I need to apply now. And I feel like it would have been much better if I had just waited a year instead of like applying, not getting in, and then having to, do 2 to 3 years of other stuff in order for you to have like a different application when you apply the second time. So I definitely rushed it, and I didn't do so well in my MCAT. So then the second time applying, I actually ended up doing the post-bac here at Texas Tech, and it was like the best decision I ever made. It was like such a good program. The head person there is Dr. Raj, and he like really helped me out. He helped me out in like every step of the way, and he was very honest with me. Even in the beginning when I went in, he was like, you know what, I think like the MCAT is kind of something that is hard for you, but you never really like focused your attention on it. So I would suggest for you to quit your job and focus on it. And it's been something that I was thinking about, but like I didn't really have that opportunity to like just not have a job. But the fact that I was in a post-bac, I was able to get out loans, which I had never done before. Like all of undergrad was paid for, so I was like really afraid to take out loans, which I think at the end, like I think it's just gonna be like you're gonna take out loans for medical school anyway. So if you have a way for you to help yourself out somehow, I think you should just take it. So I did that. I like quit my job, studied for the MCAT, did much better. And I didn't take a prep course. All I did was just do so many practice tests. I did like 20 practice tests because I think that was my main thing, that I just would run out of time. And just reading the passages and knowing how to read the passages, it's the same thing. Like they are testing the material, and you probably know the material, but just like figuring out what they're asking you and like just managing your time, I think is very important in the MCAT. And also with that post-bac program, I was able to do research. I was able to get like interview prep. I was able to get help with my secondaries, my personal statement. It was like really good, and everybody was kind of like in the same boat. So just having that support with people was really good for me. And I think that really helped me out a lot.
Okay, I applied 3 times, and oh crap. Sorry, it's my mom's birthday. She's calling me. I feel bad. So, the first time, my MCAT was fine. I applied in July. Don't do that. Have your application ready and hit submit the day it opens. If you're taking the MCAT, during that application cycle, make sure you recognize that your score is going to hit the admissions committee a month after. And they're not going to look at your application until your score comes in. Keep that in mind. Apply early, consider your MCAT scores whenever you do that. I did not know what clinical experience was, and it was really hard to get it. And so I would say, do not be that person that is shy, that doesn't want to use their social capital, that doesn't want to rely on professors to get you, shadowing experience or people that you know or family friends. Do it because everyone else is doing it, and you need to have clinical experience. If you do not have clinical experience, whether that is shadowing, whether that is working as a nurse, working as a scribe, an EMT, it's going to be very, very hard for the admissions committee to look at your application and be like, this person has everything that would make them a great doctor, but we don't know if they're committed because they haven't shown us that they've really seen what it's like to be a doctor and to see that interaction between doctors and patients. You have to show the admissions committee that you've seen that, and you do that through your clinical experience. I did that as let me tell you,
I emailed people, like just random clinics back in Houston. A dermatologist office came back to me and was like, yeah, you can shadow for the day. I went in, and they decided to offer me a job. So put your name out there. You don't know what will get back to you. And through that, I was able to be a clinical research coordinator on 4 IRB clinical trials. Like, just put your faith, put yourself out there. It'll give you something good. What else did I make? What other mistakes did I make? I was gonna say something else. Also, like my first time, I technically applied early, but I submitted my secondaries late. So that still means that you applied late, because they won't look into your application until everything is submitted. So even if you submit your primary that day, but then you submit your secondaries until like October, November, like you technically applied in October, November, because they're not gonna check your application until everything's in there.
You want to give them a quick rundown of what the application actually looks like? Because like it's very easy to be like, oh, I'm applying, but there's stages to it.
Yes. Yeah, so the application in Texas opens in May, and it means that May 1st, yeah, May 1st, which means that it's open and you can submit in May 1st. Oh, you can submit?
They open it May 1st.
Maybe you should tell.
Oh.
Well, I'm pretty sure they haven't changed this, right? But they open the
I
application.
forgot everything
And
already.
then you have 2 weeks. You have 2 weeks to fill out the application. And at the 2-week mark, you can submit. Well, first you have to fill out the application. So one thing for me, during my undergrad, I didn't do a good job keeping track of hours and stuff. So I wish there were like freshmen here from college. Many others. But that, it would be a very good idea to keep an Excel sheet or something to keep track of all the hours. Keep everything written down. I recommend Excel, that way you can just calculate everything automatically. But because at the end of 4 years, it's maybe you did a lot, and yeah, you forget. Like I had a really hard time calculating all those hours. And
you have to put like a person of contact too, right? A person of contact too. You have to put in like your hours, the amount of hours, and a person of contact. So I did that for medical school. So I have my Excel sheet because I learned from last time. I was like trying to remember or remembering who was in charge and stuff like that, because you have to have a point of contact. So you have to submit also a personal statement, and then they have like a prompt. I can't remember exactly what it was.
There's two prompts.
Yeah, one of them is a personal statement, and then another prompt. And then another optional, which is not really optional. You should do it. Just say something else about yourself. It doesn't really hurt you. Just put something else in there. And then you have to do, I think, 3 letters of recommendation, the minimum. I think professors, one has to be a science teacher. Professor, yeah. And then the other ones can be like, like physician. It's good to have like a physician letter, either that you shadowed or that you worked with. And then the other one is like a community service you did. I think that's like the standard 3 people do. And then you have to put in your grades. And then after you submit your application, then the schools start reaching out to you. And some of the schools just have a very minimum GPA or minimum MCAT, and they'll automatically send you the secondary. So when they send you the secondary, they ask you certain questions, usually like 3 to 4 short answer questions. I remember one time too, for one of them, I had to do a video.
Yeah, for Dal.
Yeah. Yeah, so.
Oh yeah, UTR.
So they ask you to do certain things like that. And they tell you like a deadline, but they usually don't say like in 2 weeks or something like that. Usually like they give you like 3 months, but ideally you want to submit that within a week and have everything so they can have your application ready to go. Because if you don't submit your secondary but everything's in, they're not going to look at it until you submit your secondary. So that's what happened to me the first time. Like I technically submitted early, but it took me forever to write all the secondaries. So I technically submitted late because I did those late. And also the secondary prompts are already online, so you can pre-write them if you want. Sorry. While you're writing these, like Molly said, contact your university. Like your university should have a writing center that helps with essays. They look at those essays too, and they can help you with your secondaries and your personal statement. And also they should have like even if you're an alumni as well, they should have that for you. You might have to pay like a price for it, like $7 or something, but I would definitely do it. And you can also utilize those services for interview practice as well. Do not sleep on interview practice. Do not sleep on interview practice. You need to look mature and your answers need to be well thought out. Sorry.
Also, so just to get an idea, how many of you are planning on applying this summer? Anyone here? Okay, so that's awesome, very exciting. So my piece of advice would be, before that, right now, hopefully get your MCAT done as soon as possible. Again, Dr. Perry was talking about having like a placeholder.
If you're ready.
If you're ready, of course. But if you're planning to apply, I'm assuming like apply when you're ready. That would be the main thing. And that also includes having your MCAT early because they will hold up your application if they don't have an MCAT. So even though you may have submitted everything, they won't look at it unless they have the entire application there. So if you're planning to go for this summer, my advice would be get your MCAT done as soon as possible. You remember, it also takes like about a month to get your score back. So you can also factor that in, especially if that is something that's going to determine whether you want to continue or not. The earlier you have that information, the better. Also, like they were mentioning, your personal statement, it is a crucial aspect. Like that's really where you're showcasing why you want to be a doctor in the first place. And we can go around and tell them what we did, but my biggest piece there would be like show, don't tell. You're going to hear that all the time. But I wouldn't just list like, oh, I've done this, this, and this, and that's why I want to be a doctor. Or like, I want to help people. They're tired of hearing that. That's not going to cut it nowadays. A lot of you are pre-meds in some capacity. So you know that you need to stand out. And you're not going to have necessarily the most unique experiences because so many of the people are doing the same things. But what you can do very unique is how you talk about those experiences and how they have molded your interest in medicine. So make sure, I think a good piece of advice I got is like if you've had a meaningful experience in medicine, run your whole essay around that. You don't have to cover and give them the entire reasons as to why you're going to be a good doctor. You're going to show that through the entire application, but maybe ground your personal statement on something unique that drew you into medicine or what difference you think you can make in the field and go from there. But also, if you have the time and planning, secondaries are brutal. Like, I don't think anyone, they tell you, but you don't realize most schools, they don't have screening criteria. As long as you submit primaries, they want to make money. So most of the time, they will send you a secondary automatically. There's very, very few schools that will actually screen and be like, we're not going to send everyone a secondary. So with that in mind, they hit you like a bus. You literally start getting them 2-3 days after you submitted. And all of a sudden, you're sitting with 15 schools, each with 4 or 5 prompts each that you need to be turning in. Usually they say 2 weeks, the latest, from when they sent you. So what you can do is go online. And I usually tell people, avoid Student Doctor Network, very toxic place, but they do have a nice compilation of all the secondaries from the schools the previous year. They rarely change them. So if you have the time leading up to your time applying, maybe start pre-writing. Have them ready to go. And then when they roll around, they'll be ready. And then after that, the sooner you can submit your secondaries and everything is in there, that's when they'll look at your applications. And then you can start waiting for interviews, which is stressful in some way, but then everything relaxes. So that would be my pieces of advice
I
there.
got a question, yeah.
Let's go.
I don't have family members or friends or anybody who has gone through there. So I'm gonna graduate from biological science and computational biomedical, this fall. But I haven't done anything for the MCAT or starting the application, just because I have been so concentrating on finishing college first. So my question is, what's the best way to go on taking the MCAT? Or how long will you guys recommend take time to take the MCAT? And then
Okay, so really quickly, the question, just the gist of it is basically how do we go about the timeline of when to take the MCAT, especially when you've been focusing a lot on your classes and trying to do as well as you can. So who hasn't spoken? Maria, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I think what I would say is that it's really going to depend on you as a person, what you're interested in, and like what works right for you. because the whole application process is really extensive. It's expensive as well, and so you're gonna want to make sure you're ready when that time comes around. So I'm not sure that there is like a set date or like set amount of years or time that you should wait until you take the MCAT. As for preparing, it also kind of depends how you feel about material. I know a lot of people will do prep classes if they feel like they haven't covered the material well or need a refresher from their undergrad. Other people who feel kind of confident might want to focus on the practice questions immediately and not do one of the prep classes. But again, it kind of depends how you're feeling currently. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has comments or suggestions.
Well, I was going to answer regarding the clinical experience. So we have an advantage here in El Paso that we have a medical school. I don't know how people in, like, let's say, Eagle Pass would go about this, but so if you go online and you can look up Texas Tech Physicians of El Paso, Texas Tech Physicians of El Paso, and then just think about different specialties. For example, Texas Tech Physicians of El Paso Internal Medicine. And then you can go to the website, and then somewhere you can find a tab that says faculty. And most departments have the faculty members' emails, and those are people that you can contact. A lot of our faculty members, they do see their emails. Others, well, they don't even answer our emails as the medical students. So you're gonna, you have to take a shotgun approach and email as many faculty. Like, I know pediatrics for sure, they're all up there. For example, can you look up Texas Tech Physicians of El Paso?
Doing it right now.
Of El Paso? Yeah. Pediatrics.
And I think also Texas Tech has a program, no?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, also you can always contact Mr. Andre. Wait, go back.
Where do you want to go to?
Here, let me show you.
Yeah, come. Pediatrics?
Oh.
Yeah.
Pass the mic, yeah. So what was your name again?
Yes.
Yeah. Astrid? Okay, so Astrid, I feel like I was in your same shoes a few years ago. So I didn't decide to go into medical school until junior year of undergrad. So I kind of rushed to get all the courses done. Didn't even think about the MCAT or any of the like getting any clinical experience. But I knew that I wanted to come back to El Paso, and I also knew that I needed a job. Like, I couldn't really shadow without getting paid. So I would really recommend like being a scribe. I think that gave me a lot of experience, and it also pays. Oh, okay.
Great.
Yes. So yeah, I really recommend it. I worked at Sierra, and I think the doctors there were great, and they really helped me out. And it just really gives you a very good perspective of like the medical field, and it also gives you a chance to look at the emergency medicine and see if you want to do that. You can also look at Yes. Yeah, I think that's where most of the scribes go to, because that's what they needed the most. In terms of the MCAT though, like, I feel like I was after undergrad, I was a little burned out, so then I didn't study for it right away. So I guess depending on how you are, if you want to get like clinical experience for like a few months and then take the MCAT, I think that would be a good idea. And maybe if you're already working for a while, you can ask like the scribe to only give you a shift, maybe 1 or 2 shifts a week, so you can have the rest of the time to study for your MCAT. And based on the MCAT too, like, I took a prep course and I didn't really enjoy it as much. I know Amadeus has like a different story, but I guess it depends on what you do. I think a lot of the MCAT prep courses, they have like what is it called? Like a pre-MCAT test to see where you're at. So I would take that, and it's like half of the test, and it tells you like at the end of it, like, oh, these are your weaknesses, and you can kind of tell to see if like your weaknesses rely on the material or more taking test. So what worked for me is I was okay with the material, but like just taking the test and like taking like managing my time and reading the passages, that's what I struggled with. So for me, it was just taking so many practice tests. So I would do it at the ideal like set time. So they give you like 8 hours. So I would come to like the library and stay there for 8 hours and take the test and force myself to do that, because I just hated to do that so much. So I just forced myself to do that, and that's what helped me a lot. but I guess it depends on how you are. And I think like taking like a pretest like that really helps you out to decide what you need to do. And another way you can also do is maybe like get out the MCAT out of the way. If you feel okay after getting out of undergrad and you feel like you can study for the MCAT, maybe just apply to Scribe America positions and then like take the MCAT. And then after you take the MCAT, you can start working. I just wouldn't suggest doing it at the same time because I did that and it didn't work out for me. I feel like the MCAT, you really need to at least put like 75% of your time to it, like the least. Mostly it's like 100% of the time you want to really focus on studying. And that doesn't mean like 3 months. It just means like whatever time it takes for you to get there. But also you have to make yourself peak at the MCAT. So you don't want to take so much time that you're burned out, but you also don't want to study enough. So you just kind of have to have that momentum and make sure you just don't burn out and you're able to like do your best at that time. So I started with taking one practice test every 2 weeks, and then I would go from once a week, and then I ended up doing like 3 a week. So what depends on like how you learn and how you go. And I think just taking practice tests is very good because it tells you your score. So I think I did like maybe 1 or 2 points around the score that I got. So it's really good. Also like, okay, I'm gonna take it, and I think I'm gonna do around this, and it was right. So if you keep taking it and you keep getting like a 500 and you're like, oh, I'm hoping if I get to that test, I'm probably going to do better. It's like, probably not. Like, that's probably around the score you're going to get. So just taking those practice tests, and if you see yourself increase and you get the score that you want, then you're ready to take it.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Okay, we got another question. Oh, yeah.
Well,
Oh, of course.
I work in pediatrics, so you had the screen up, and I was going to show you which doctors would respond more to email. And I'm asking for my son. He had work today, so that's not me. I'm really too old to start. Just different. I'm asking, why is it that you can only take it 5 times, the MCAT? Is it because if you haven't passed by then, well, it's not for you, or you're a bad tester, or can you take it as many times as you really want to? What is there a cutoff? I mean, sometimes people are bad testers,
I guess they kind of just set that rule.
Yeah, that's just something. There's the people in the AAMC in their ivory towers. That's just something they decided on.
They've also
it's a regulation, yeah.
And they've set it to 2, I think 2 a year, right?
2 per year.
Yeah.
2 per year.
That
a lifetime max of 5.
Yeah.
Because they don't want people to waste time and money. They're like, if you really did badly, take proper time to, like, don't just rush and turn around and do it again, and then rush and turn around and do it again. Like, so make sure that it matters and it counts and, all that.
Yeah, with that in mind, a lot of schools don't they'll look at trends like in everything, but no one knows exactly what goes on in those admission committees.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of the idea that they can also average them out. So you're taking several, like a lot of people are like, oh, let me take one, see how it goes, and then I'll take the next one. Probably not the best approach because you don't know how they're being taken into account, and they can definitely see. It's not like I know with the SAT something they were like they'll look at your high score. In here they'll look at everything. So you don't want to just be trying out to see how it goes and then try another one. You want to be prepared by the time you take it. So also bear that in mind.
Oh, I will add to that. Different schools will do different things with those multiple tests, and you can ask that school's admissions committee, if I have 2 MCATs, how will you lay out the data? And they will tell you, we're going to look at only the test you scored better on. Or they'll tell you, we'll take your best scores from each section. Or they'll tell you, we'll average the 2 tests. And different schools do different things.
We should have asked Dr. Perry what they do here.
It's a secret. No, I'm just kidding.
There's also accommodations for the MCAT for different things. So look into that and take advantage of it if you need to.
Okay, we have another question.
Yes.
Were any of you working full time while preparing for the MCAT?
Yes. Amadeus for sure. Yeah.
You go
first. Experience.
Okay. So I was working full time, just 40 hours a week, sometimes more. And I guess for me, I had kind of a good situation because being a nurse, I could also work in freestandings. So freestandings are standalone clinics. So instead of being in the busy ER where I would never be able to sit down, I would be able to just kind of work, and I would get like, I don't know, like sniffles, stomach ache, things like that. But you also have to keep in mind it is an ER, so sometimes we would get like random gunshot wounds, walk in, and you'd be like, well, I guess I'm not studying today. So that was like my special circumstance. And also the way that nurses work, you only work 3 days a week. So I would work 3 days, I would kind of lose out 3 days of studying, but then I would have 4 days to recuperate. So for me, it kind of worked out. That's the way I did it for my first MCAT. No, my second MCAT that I took, because I took 2. And the first one, I didn't do that. It was the middle of COVID, and I guess I kind of was trying to save the world. So I worked 2 full-time jobs. So I was working about 80 hours a week, and then I would study in between, and then I would study on my day off. And then I'd be like, yeah, that was not a good idea. And just to reiterate that for people online, for our school at Texas Tech, we do look at the highest score.
Really quickly, I also worked full time. It was more a standard job. I was doing more like the consulting area. Not fun. I'm not gonna like it because you're doing literally like I was working like 10 to 12 hours a day, and then I had to log off work and jump onto studying up until midnight, 1 a.m. Go to sleep, wake up, repeat. If you're able to, it's great to take some time off. Don't make it too long. I think Sachi made a very good point. Some people are like, you're never going to feel fully ready. And a lot of people like extend it for 6 months, over a year, and they're reviewing and they move on to tests. By the time you get to practice questions, you're going to forget what you were studying on the first day. If you do not make an intense period of time in which you're like sort of concentrating all the knowledge and getting your practice in, a lot of it is not going to be as worthwhile. So don't extend your MCAT studying period too much. I think like 3 months should be enough if you're able to fully focus on it. It's hard, if you're able to financially like take that time off to do that, that's amazing, but not everyone can. I know I couldn't. So you make the best of it. And my best advice is if you're going to be in that situation, try to stick to a formal routine and make sure like, it's like I would log off work. I would give myself 1 hour to eat, relax a little bit, jump back in. I'm starting from this time to this time. And every weekend I'm going to be doing practice tests. You need to be very, very disciplined if that's your situation, just to make sure you have the time for it.
Also, one thing that was very helpful for me, the first time I didn't qualify, but the second time I did, is the fee assistance. So through the AAMC, there's like something you can apply to called the fee assistance. And if you qualify, they lowered the standards in COVID, so that's why I was able to qualify. But if you qualify, I think the MCAT is like half, and then you can change the date. Yeah, and then they give you free resources. So they give you like 4 practice tests, I think, for free. And once you submit them, and they also give you your score, and they also tell you like answers, explanations on the answers, why they were. And that really helped me a lot. And then also they let you apply to 15 schools for free, but not in Texas. That's the only bad thing. So this is, no, I think Baylor was the only one, and then they changed it. So now Baylor is through the Texas one.
It's because they forced Baylor to be part of the
Mhm.
because of
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess that's something we didn't talk about. Like, there's 2 applications, like technically 3 applications. So there's a Texas one, that's the MD schools, and I think there's like 2 DO schools there. And then there is the AMC one, which is like all of the US, and then like DO schools. So the AMC ones, they have a fee assistance. So they give you up to, I think, 15 schools to apply for free if you qualify for the fee assistance, and also they waive your application fee. So it really helped me out a lot. And for Texas, I think I emailed like all the schools and told them like, oh, I am in the fee assistance program. Is there a way for you to like help me out with the secondary application fee? A lot of them said no, but I think like half said yes, and they took it completely off, or at least half of it off. So just, even though they don't really like advertise it, like just go ask. Like you know, I qualify for the fee assistance. Like, are you able to like, you know, help me out with this application fee? And a lot of them were able to. So that really helped. And there's a lot more resources in that fee assistance. I can't remember all of them, but it's a lot of resources you can do.
Is the Texas Tech one of those schools that'll help out? the assistance?
Yes, they waived mine.
They waived it. Yeah, I think they waived it. I think this one in Lubbock waived it. And which other school waived it? I think the one in Galveston, they waived it. Yeah, but Texas Tech doesn't have. I mean, Texas medical schools don't have a like fee assistance, but it's much less than the AAMC one. It's much less. I think for you to apply to them, it's like 180. And I think for the AMC, it's like 360 or something like that. Plus each medical school that you add is like $50 more. And I think in the Texas one, they don't charge you per school. You can just apply to all of them. And their secondary ones are around $50, $60. But the one in AMC, they're like $90, $100. So it really helped me out that second time. Because the first time I didn't get it. So I only applied to like 5-7 schools because it was very expensive.
Yeah, and just as a note for the Texas schools, since it's one flat fee to apply, I would just apply to all of the Texas schools because it's the same price. You don't have to pay per school for that primary application. So,
Yes.
What was the name of that for the Texas school?
the application's called TMD-SAS, and then it's AMCAS for the non-Texas schools.
So like, I know you mentioned that in the US, right? Can you like recommend like maybe like one time like if it's really not necessary, or is it annoying to like it's the admissions people who are gonna go with
Wait, did they allow it?
Yes, I think they allow up to 4. 06.
5 or 6. Yeah.
Yeah, I submitted 4.
So you really want letters that are able to elaborate on your strength. So, and on the essays, be authentic, because I've read a lot of essays that, I grew up at McDonald's, he's somebody famous, and I stayed for that. Really determined. So, be
Sounds like something someone would do.
What you do actually?
Someone.
Just to reiterate for the people online, Dr. Chacon is one of the faculty reviewers of applications, stated that if you have extra letters of rec, definitely include them, because when she reviews applications with her limited time, she goes straight to the letters of rec, and she can tell when, or she says that, don't go after someone just for their title or their position. Have someone that really, really knows you write your letter of rec. And that goes for residencies too, for any higher education. And then for your personal statement, that's the second thing she looks at. Make sure that it's authentic because she can see through that real quick.
Oh, and just one note for the recommendation letters, those extra letters could be an opportunity to do someone who you might not think of originally. So like for me, one of my letters came from my orchestra director because I'm really into music. And so just it could be an extra opportunity to kind of show more breadth of your experiences.
But don't do family members.
Yeah.
Please don't. So I think to end, we're just gonna go down and give one final piece of advice. Maybe that would give on them, and then we'll move on to the tour and we'll end.
Are there any last burning questions?
We'll have an opportunity still at the end to talk to you all, so
Okay.
I think we can just go down and just for a second time.
Yeah.
A quick piece of advice.
Apply early, don't sleep on interviews, use UWorld for the MCAT.
Yeah, I guess when you prepare for the MCAT, take a lot of practice exams. Don't rush your application. If you feel like you need an extra year, just take that extra year. It's better to do that than having to apply multiple times. And yeah.
I recommend reading the TMD-SAS handbook. I mean, it's helpful, especially because it's so something you don't expect is that you have to put in all of your classes and all of the grades, and like I think they even ask for like the CRN of the class or something. It's ridiculous. That takes forever. So read the handbook. It really guides you through the application.
Thanks, Sergio. I'm not really sure what to say about the application, to be honest.
I know we're busting myths about med school in general, and I know that most of the questions in the room are focused on the application. I'm trying to think of something to say about med school itself. If you have really in your heart that you know you don't want to be a physical therapist, you know you don't want to be a nurse, you know you don't want to be a social worker, you know that you want to be a doctor, and when you get here, the workload itself, especially if you've had previous experience with a job where people were relying on you, here, some people in our class who are angels and superheroes, they have jobs that they do them on the weekends, and others of us don't, and that's fine. But you are. This is a totally different experience than anything else I've ever had in my life, you know, and it has really stretched me to realize that I was capable, both I think intellectually and personally, academically, of more than I gave myself credit for. Because I always thought, you know, I'm not naturally as smart as some other people. I just get by because I bust, you know. But being here as well and realizing that part of what you need in order to do well is to love what you're doing. And there have been a lot of times looking at this material where you can get really, really overwhelmed and stressed, and then you realize, this is really cool. Or I wonder what it's going to be like when I meet some person that has this. And that's what I want to say.
Speechless. No, but I guess piggyback on that situation too, because I didn't do well in like the MCAT and a lot of like the science classes. I didn't really like them. And I know that sounds weird because you're in med school, but the reason I figured out after we started med school is because learning physics and biology and things like that never really interested me until I had to put it into a clinical situation, because I enjoy treating people. That's what I learned from nursing, is that I enjoy having patients and like seeing them and talking with them and then thinking of their disease process helps me understand things, because that's the setting I need to learn those things in. So now I can learn biochemistry, I can learn like physics and all of that, but I have to learn it for some reason in a clinical setting. Like it has to, I guess in a sense, have a meaning to me, because if I just learn it up front, did not work. Like every time I took the MCAT, I had to bank on like psych, soc, and cars, because I just started reading. Like she said, reading and leisure. I just started reading books every day. But for me, science was always, I was very average. But just find what you love and just let it guide you, because even though I was getting discouraged, because a lot of my classmates are like strong science majors, I was very average. But when I got into the clinical situation, that's when I was able to shine. I was like, okay, I like this. I like treating patients. I like knowing clinical symptoms, and I like knowing their pathology. So that's what really helped me. So just kind of, if you know this is what you want to do, just keep going and keep trying.
I can use this one. I think my piece of advice, which is kind of echoing what Molly already said, but try and find and do things that you're genuinely passionate about and that you genuinely find meaning in. And also reflect on those things that you're doing and try to think, what have I learned from this? How has this made me grow as a person? What kind of skills have I learned? And how can I take this with me moving forward? Because I feel like when you're passionate about something, it really shows when you're speaking about it, and it you can see how it's contributed to who you are as a person. And I feel like personal statements, all of the application process, it'll come through if you are really enjoying what you're doing.
And my advice, it might be a little bit targeted, but I think a lot of people from here are from El Paso, and I may be assuming here, but I'm assuming a lot of you are Latinos or part of underrepresented groups. And one thing, I always heard this, but it's so true. We really need you in medicine. We really, really do. You make a difference to the patients you encounter. You can see it here, like race concordance and actually diversifying the field has such a huge impact, let alone not necessarily just pure diagnostic or anything, but just the type of relationships, the kind of trust that you can build. And unfortunately, this field has so many barriers to access, from financial to social capital, like Dr. Perry was mentioning. And it's very hard to get minorities into this field. But when you're here and you go through it, and it's hard as hell because you maybe they have the same opportunities or access to other people, but when you make it through, your patients are going to love you for it. So if you ever doubt that, just remember, like, these patients, they really, really need you. So if this is something you want to do, please keep pushing.
I guess the next portion for whoever wants to stay or anything, we can give you guys a tour of like this medical building so you can see like the colleges. We can show you kind of where we can't really go into them because it's kind of an impromptu tour, but we can show you kind of where we have like medical skills. We have like not fake, but like standardized patients. And then we're like the cadavers. Yeah, we basically have actors. Yeah. But whoever wants to, we're going to meet up outside.
Before we end, I also want to introduce Jen Griffin is also a first-year medical student, and she's absolutely amazing. So, so I also wanted to introduce her. So, your piece of advice.
What you were doing before med school.
So I tried to plan things in advance, and I did look for resources. And in case you didn't see, I tried to write down the things that we mentioned that might be helpful and be free, like MCAT practice tests. I think a lot of us would want them. And I did join a service, though. I joined Kaplan. But there are also free or low-cost practice tests elsewhere, so you can try these sites and see what you can, find there. I've tried most of them, and your world, most people say is very good, and even for medical students, we're going to use them in the future. And I think it's really, really important to plan well in advance to avoid having to apply twice or redo things because you need several years to build another different looking application, just like Stephanie said, and I totally understand that and agree with that sentiment. That's about it, really. I think our panelists really have told you guys a lot of very, very useful advice that I resonate with a lot. So
Yes. I would say my advice and what I've seen with the students and previous students is I have a Mickey Mouse in my office and he's looking straight ahead and he cannot turn his head. And what I find is some people, just in general, we tend to compare ourselves with others. So we're on this mission and this road, right? And we know where we want to go. But then sometimes we're like, what's that person doing? What's that person doing? Well, my friend wore a blue shirt for exam and got an A, so I'm going to wear a blue shirt. And no, it didn't work. And oh no, now what? So remember why you're doing it, where you want to be, and just focus and work your butt off and you will succeed. But if you're constantly looking this way, looking that way, and comparing yourself to others, you're going to set yourself up for failure because it's your road and you are behind the steering wheel. So that's one thing I wanted to leave with. But yes, do a tour. I want to thank my students. I started this program to showcase our students because I know firsthand how hard they work. And they are our biggest stakeholders, but they're also the rock stars. So any opportunity that I can have